Hello viewers and welcome to yet another commentated match of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. My name is Mitch and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today I'm pleased to present you with another video previewing some of our upcoming Planetfall cycle warlords. Today we're going to be seeing none other than Travis McDaniel playing Broderick Worr, and we're also going to be seeing Guy Lev testing out subject Ω-X62113. It looks as though Travis, playing as Broderick, has decided to keep his opening hand, and in assessing Broderick's ability, any army units that retreat from his planet are destroyed instead of retreating. And also, each other AM unit that Travis controls at a green strongpoint planet gets +1 attack, and it can neither retreat nor be routed. In assessing Glaiveguy's Warlord, subject Ω-X basically allows him to ambush any Gene Stealer card into play from his hand. So it could be an army unit, it could be an attachment, so long as it has the Gene Stealer trait, that is an option available to him. And because subject Omega relies very heavily on infested planets to benefit from his ability, why not run the Blazing Zoanthrope? So at the onset of the combat phase, it's either 1 damage or 2 damage to a target enemy army unit based upon whether the planet is infested or not. The initiative token is in Guy's hand. For his action, we see a Ripper Swarm put out to planet number 5, and for Broderick, we see a Rockcrete Bunker, which is going to remove damage upon assignment from his units. Very interesting play here. We actually see a copy of the Elite Umgarl Gene Stealer put out to planet number 1. If subject Omega or Broderick go to planet number 1, it gets +2 attack. If the Blazing Zoanthrope goes to that planet, it gets +2 HP. Normally with subject Omega, that's much better, played out for a surprising swing of 6 against an enemy warlord. But, especially considering that Guy was able to affix a copy of Regeneration to it, that could just be an incredibly menacing unit throughout the remainder of the game. So it's a 4/6 with an enemy warlord, it becomes a 6/6. With a Synapse unit, it becomes a 6/8. And of course, Regeneration lets you pull wounds off of it. So very interesting play there. I'll be very curious to see if the Lethal Toxin Sacs also comes into play, which would give the Umgarl Gene Stealer there an additional 3 attack and -1 HP. And note that since this is a Gene Stealer card, it could be ambushed into play from subject Omega's hand. But for our Broderick Worr player, we've got a copy of the Catachan Outpost sitting here in his HQ. We've got a Rattling Deadeye put out to planet number 4. We also see a Talarn Raiders interplay at planet number 3. And we've got a copy of the signature army unit, the Anxious Infantry Platoon. And all of this is going to mean that there's going to be quite a bit of just command phase income for a Broderick Worr player. I'd be halfway tempted to send Broderick to planet number 5 just to make sure that the Tyranid player potentially doesn't have any income at all, but I'll be very curious to see where exactly subject Omega ends up going. He could go to Yavvarn, wouldn't have been the worst choice. I guess subject Omega ends up sending himself to planet number 5. Broderick Worr goes to planet number 5, and we see that Blazing Zoanthrope touchdown on planet number 4. So that's going to be 2 planets for each of our players, 1 in regard to command, and going into the combat phase, neither of them will have any resources prior to command. And it looks as though Glaiveguy actually just won 3 cards, 1 resource, and Travis, dissimilarly, only got 0 cards and 3 resources, which is definitely going to be a bit of a bummer. He's got a powerful event in hand, but he's going to have a lot of resources going into the next round, and he'll only at most be able to draw 2 army units. Glaiveguy only has 1 resource, but he's also got kind of a range of powerful effects here, so we're going to see combat break out at planet number 1, planet number 5. We're going to see the Zoanthrope likely destroy this Rattling Deadeye unless we see promotion discarded as shields, but let's see what exactly happens. So the combat phase is going to, okay, I guess I forgot about the Rockcrete Bunker here. So it's when damage is assigned, it's not just when assigned due to an attack, so we need not spend a shield. But Aatrox Aatrox Prime is going to be one entirely uncontested by our Tyranid player, and that means he's going to be able to pick and choose target player's HQ or an adjacent planet. It's going to be Ossus 4 to deal 1 damage to all enemy army units, well, all enemy units present at that planet. So the Anxious Infantry Platoon is potentially going to take 1 point of damage, unless, of course, we see that promotion used as shields. Just because it's one of scarcely few cards in hand for Broderick, even though it's not really going to come into play this round, we have the immensely powerful Emperor's Warrant, which he basically exhausts a target enemy unit at a planet where there's no enemy warlord, and then you deal damage equal to that unit's attack value to another target unit. So you can basically exhaust an army, you can destroy a token or another army unit. Incredibly powerful, but it doesn't really do any good whatsoever when there are warlords present. We can see that battle is erupting at planet number 5, and that is going to be the Ripper Swarm taking the first attack. So Broderick Worr takes 1 point of damage. He's going to be augmented by the Catachan Outpost, and he will have a chance to swing for 4. And that is going to be directly to Subject Omega. Interestingly, we see the Lethal Toxin Sacks used as shields, so that's only going to be 1 point of damage. What's interesting is that you can deploy the Lethal Toxin Sacks from your discard pile, but you can only ambush it into play when it's in your hand. So we could very well see that used again, put onto another army unit. Subject Omega is going to take a swing for 2 at Broderick Worr, and that's going to bring us to the end of the combat round, and I can only imagine that Broderick Worr is indeed going to be retreating. So it was a very interesting start here for our Tyranid, but it seems as though things are going to potentially go all right for him. Definitely noteworthy, this Anxious Infantry Platoon sitting at our soon-to-be planet number 1. It's attacking for 4. Granted, it's only got 2 hit points left, but the initiative token's going to be in Broderick Worr's hand, and because it's currently sitting at a green planet, you basically ignore its forced reaction, so it's basically, it cannot retreat or be routed so long as there's a Hail Broderick Worr, and it's at a green planet. But Elowith is going to be triggered by glaiveguy. He gets to search the top 3 cards of his deck for any 1 card that he'd like, put the remaining 2 on the bottom of his deck in whatever order. He's got a couple copies of No Mercy, which could be very handy because he's got this unique Synapse unit sitting around there. He drew a copy of Volatile Pyrovore with his Elowith effect, which is incredibly nasty. Granted, it's pretty expensive, but it attacks for 3, it's pretty hardy, and if it's destroyed by an attack, that's going to be an opportunity for him to deal 3 damage out to the attacker. We got a 2-cost, 2-command icon unit for our Tyranid player. The initiative token transfers over to Broderick Worr, and let's do a real quick rundown here. We've got a Virulent Spore Sacs, which you can sacrifice it to blow it up at a planet. You basically trigger an area effect 1 attack on all of your enemies, and then you also infest the planet, which would then afford Subject Omega the opportunity to kind of replenish some of your battlefield forces. The Yumgarl Gene Stealer is very expensive at 5, but we're also proxying one of the upcoming Gene Stealer cards, the Gene Stealer Prowler, in this video, and that's a 1-cost 2/2. So it's a little bit better than an Eager Recruit, albeit at the cost of needing to have a planet infested to benefit from it. We see the signature event for Subject Omega, Gene Implantation, and this is pretty much fantastic. If a Gene Stealer kills an army unit 3 or lower with an attack, you basically return that unit to play under your control, which could be absolutely fantastic. And then last but not least, of the signature squad here for Subject Omega, we see his support. I think this is very unlikely to see play during this game, but you play it, you exhaust it, you sacrifice it to ready each Gene Stealer unit you control at a target planet. It could be the Yumgarl, it could be Subject Omega, it could be those Gene Stealer Prowlers, and eventually whatever it is that our developer Brad Andrews ends up designing. We see a Toxic Venom Throat put out to planet number 3, allowing that to quite handily trump the Rattling Deadeye's command, and what's very interesting here is that even though Travis is drawing a wealth of powerful events, he's getting a little bit choked by them. So he's got 3 2-shield icon cards in hand, 2 copies of the Emperor's Warrant, and 1 copy Preemptive Barrage. But when you've only got 4 different AM units at 4 different planets, Preemptive Barrage, giving your units ranged, isn't nearly as beneficial. But I've not done a rundown of our planets yet. Planet number 1 presently is Ossus 4, the Steel 1 resource planet. Yvvarn is planet number 2, which affords players the opportunity to put a unit into play from their HQ. Planet number 3 is going to be Iridial, the healing planet. Note that Broderick Worr already has 3 points of damage, so that could be a reasonable target for him. Planet number 4, as seen before, is Elowith, and planet number 5 is Taurus, the planet that rewards players for keeping their unit count lower than that of their opponent. So definitely a fair few interesting destinations here. I could easily see Broderick going to Taurus, although the volatile Pyrovore is going to basically prevent him from being able to handily win at that planet. If he were to, like if the volatile Pyrovore got off a swing, he'd potentially be bloodied. Of course, Guy has no idea there's such a surplus of 2 shield icon cards here in Broderick's hand, but then that interrupt ability is also posing a tremendous threat for Broderick to be potentially bloodied. So let's see here. I think Subject Omega is currently possessing just 1 blue technology icon, so I could definitely see him giving up Ossus 4. Why bother trying to kill the Anxious Infantry platoon where it's, when it's at its strongest and where it's at its strongest? If he captures Yvvarn and captures Iridial, then that could set him up to win the game. So he could send his units to Iridial just to make sure that Broderick Worr does not benefit from that effect, but it does not seem as though that's actually going to be the case. So to my surprise, I guess, or to what I had not been anticipating, Subject Omega actually goes to planet number 2, and we see Broderick Worr go to planet number 4, and we also see the Blazing Zoanthrope go to planet number 4. So the Zoanthrope can only target army units, and I'm sure that our Tyranid player is happy to see this, considering that Worr could potentially be attacking for 4 against the Blazing Zoanthrope is 2 copies of Spore Burst, 2 shield icon cards, and it's going to be a grand total of 2 cards, 2 resources for Guy, 2 cards, 2 resources for Travis. We see a couple of signature cards here for Broderick Worr. We've got another copy of the signature Army Unit Anxious Infantry Platoon, and we've also got a copy of the Summary Execution, his signature event. You play it only during a battle. You basically sacrifice a unit at the same planet as your Warlord, and then let me just verify. That is only army units for the Zoanthrope. So there we go. But in any case, Summary Execution at the same planet as your Warlord, you sacrifice a unit, and that planet gains a green strongpoint icon until the end of the battle, and then it has a bit of a built-in cantrip effect where it replaces itself with 1 card. Little bit of an interesting choice there. Looks as though we accidentally counted strongpoint icons twice in regard to Travis winning Ossus 4. So Travis is going to steal 1 resource from Guy, and now we're going to see battle break out at Yvvarn. So the Tallarn Raiders here are presently going to be attacking for 2. Certainly there is a wealth of 2 shield icon cards that our Astra Militarum player can use, and I guess actually since the Tallarn Raiders are sitting here at a green planet, Broderick Worr augments their attack value to 3. So considering that we've also got the Catachan Outpost, that could potentially be 5, and that could make a tremendous bit of difference here. So we see the Rockcrete Bunker absorb 1 point of damage dealt to the Tallarn Raiders, so that means they're going to be able to swing, but will it be for 3 or will it be for 5? I just think our Tyranid player is pretty lucky that he came across these Spore Bursts, and then with these 2 No Mercies in hand, I'll be curious to see when exactly those come into play. The Yumgarl Genestealer right now will be attacking for 6 because it's at the same planet as a Warlord, but the Tallarn Raiders aren't exactly the most desirable target for it. Interestingly, the Catachan Outpost was not used, so that's going to be 1 point of damage to Subject Omega, and I'll just be sure to indicate that. Something slightly problematic with the somewhat technologically disinclined Guy Lev is that he's not actually using proxy files, so he's kind of going off of memory and having a browser open. But in any case, it's easy to forget which of these planets happen to be laden with green strong point icons, and that Broderick Worr influences those. So Travis basically cannot retreat his Tallarn Raiders. It's going to be up to Subject Omega to try to kill off that unit. The Yumgarl Genestealer can quite handily do that, and the initiative, of course, is going to be in Subject Omega's hand. So that's going to be an attack of 6, and that Tallarn Raiders is going to be very killed. And that's going to be Yvarn's battle ability potentially triggered. We have an Anxious Infantry platoon in play for our Astra Militarum player, and we only have a Virulent Spore Sacs here for Guy. So, to no one's surprise, we do not see Yvarn triggered. During the next round, if Yvarn is won, that's going to put Guy at a point where he could potentially win the game. Note that Travis has 10 resources, which is absolutely incredible. So, for his sake, hopefully next turn he'll draw 2 very expensive army units, or at least 2 powerful army units, maybe another couple copies of the Anxious Infantry platoon here. But we're going to see combat erupt at our current planet number 4. That's going to be Broderick Worr, who thanks to a Catachan outpost could deal out 4 points of damage to the Blazing Zoanthrope, and that will force a shield card to be used by our Tyranid player. But let's see how things break down. Broderick could also retreat. He's in danger of taking another couple points of damage. Any cards that he uses for shields are going to be pretty important. Even this copy of Promotion would be pretty nice. But it looks as though we're going to see Broderick go for the kill. So I'll be curious to see what exactly happens here. Our Tyranid player is definitely going to have to balance trying to harass the enemy with trying to preserve the Blazing Zoanthrope. So Broderick Worr is going to be attacking for 4, and what exactly will happen? Will we see a 1 shield icon card discarded? No, we see the Spore Burst. So that's only going to be 2 points of damage dealt out to the Zoanthrope, and now our Tyranid player can relatively securely stay at that planet with both units, knowing full well that he can use a 1 shield icon card. So let's see here. This is going to be exhausting a target enemy unit. So he exhausts at a planet without an enemy warlord. So not a bad play here. He exhausts the Blazing Zoanthrope and then deals damage equal to its attack value to the Ripper Swarm. So kind of an interesting choice here, using such a powerful effect to try to kill off a Ripper Swarm and a relatively weak unit. But when you want to try to keep your warlord from being bloodied by all means possible, I suppose that definitely makes sense. But the Ripper Swarm is going to survive. We see a copy of it was No Mercy that spared its life, I believe. So let's see how this breaks down. We see that Ripper Swarm take a swing at Broderick Worr. We see Promotion discarded as shields, and even though the Blazing Zoanthrope and the Ripper Swarm aren't particularly formidable units, what kind of stinks is that because their low amounts of damage are split between 2 different attacks, Broderick is going to have to use just as many shield cards to deal with those. Interestingly, we see our Tyranids forces retreat, and that means Eloith is going to be targeted, activated by, yes, so actually our spectator calls out a very good point. The Ripper Swarm cannot retreat in any case. So the Synapse unit can. So it's only army units that Broderick Worr disallows from retreating. So let's see how exactly this functions. I suppose that's yet another function of Guy not actually using proxy files. Things like that are fairly easy to miss. But the Blazing Zoanthrope does manage to escape, and even though the Ripper Swarm is bound to be destroyed upon Broderick's first opportunity to swing, I suppose it's better to force your enemy to attack than to be outright destroyed upon attempting to retreat. So there we go. The Ripper Swarm is destroyed. It was not able to leave the planet, and now we'll see that copy of Elowith triggered. And this is just going to be of the paramount importance, I believe, for Travis, because he's really going to need army units to plant at planet number 2, or more likely planet number 3, just to try to block off his enemy's victory conditions. So I think our Tyranid is definitely going to want to deploy heavily to Iridial to try to block off his opponent's position there, and this copy of the Virulent Spore Sacs could potentially be absolutely fantastic in helping him kind of shore up that planet. So we saw a few interesting things here, and let's kind of break it down. So planet number 1, we've got this nicely positioned Yumgarl Gene Stealer. It's got regeneration attached to it. If Broderick goes to that planet, that is incredibly foolish, unless we see the Emperor's Warrant used yet again, just because it's, you know, a regenerating guy with 4 hit points that swings for 6. That's a complete nightmare. Plus, we see Dark Cunning, where it could potentially attack twice, but very interestingly, we see a copy of the Invasive Gene Stealers. This is the signature army unit for Subject Omega. It's a 2/3 for 3 with 1 command, and once you play it, you pick an enemy army unit at that planet. Until the end of the phase, that unit, like this Rattling Deadeye, gets -1 HP, it would die immediately, and the Invasive Gene Stealers gets +1 HP. It's entirely possible also that this might be used as an ambush if we do see an infested planet. Somewhat to my surprise, the Virulent Spore Sacs are put out to planet number 1, which could afford it the opportunity to infest that planet, and then we could see that Gene Stealer ambushed into play. But the Virulent Spore Sacs is going to be 1 area effect style damage. I'll be very curious to see now where Broderick Worr goes. The Gene Stealer, if it gets ambushed into play, it could be a 2/4 for the remainder of the entire combat round. That's definitely not a bad thing. Guy doesn't have nearly as many resources as he'd like, I'm sure, but the Ruined Passages are looking more and more an appealing option, and now I'll just be very curious to see how things break down. Looks as though glaiveguy indicates he's going to pass. We see a Sanctioned Psyker put out to our new planet number 5, which is Barless, the random card discard planet, and we see an Anxious Infantry platoon alongside an Engine Seer Augur put out to planet number 1 by Broderick Worr. So both of those units are going to get a +1 attack bonus. They cannot retreat, they cannot be routed, and we've got a preemptive barrage, we've got an Emperor's Warrant, and all of those effects could just combine to be a monumental amount of damage dealt out to the Tyranid players. So this Yumgarl Gene Stealer, it's got 2 cards and 6 resources invested in it, but it's far from invincible. I would not be surprised to see Broderick Worr go to Iridial, but similarly, I suppose I wouldn't be too surprised to see Subject Omega go to that planet either. But looks like Subject Omega is going to be going to planet number 5. The Blazing Zoanthrope is going to end up at planet number 1, and of course, I'm not surprised to see Broderick Worr go to planet number 2. So this is going to be 2 copies of Preemptive Barrage. Note that Iridial does happen to be infested from something. I forget what exactly caused it to be infested, but in any case, it's going to be command won by our Tyranid at 3 planets, and that's going to be Travis winning command at 1 planet. So that's 1 card for Travis, 3 cards, and 2 resources for glaiveguy. So let's see how things go. Glaiveguy ended up coming across 2 copies of the Gene Stealer Prowler, which are incredibly powerful potentially if used, thanks to Subject Omega's ability to put into play. And I'm just gonna, how did Planet 2 get infested? Present a little question to our players there, because for the life of me, I simply cannot remember. I guess that was the Zoanthrope last turn or something. All right, so with that cleared up, I suppose we're going to see combat here break out at planet number 1. Note that the virulent spore sacks are going to be able to explode, deal out some damage to the infantry platoon, the Enginseer Augur, and then they're going to afford the Tyranid player the opportunity to ambush any Genestealer units to planet number 1 or planet number 2. We could have this invasive Genestealer drop into play, potentially deal the final point of damage to the anxious infantry platoon. Or also, we could see something happen where just a myriad Genestealers are dropped into play at planet number 2, and then Broderick Worr is actually forced away from that planet. For instance, maybe Broderick Worr takes a swing at the Toxic Venomthrope, and once he's exhausted, 2 Prowlers and an invasive Genestealer all drop down. We could even see the gene implantation, like let's say the invasive Genestealer touches down, then it kills the anxious infantry platoon, then we see gene implantation steal it, and then it attacks Broderick Worr for 3, potentially an incredibly powerful effect. So let's see here. We see the Emperor's Warrant, which is going to be played at planet number 1 on the Yumgarl Genestealer. It's currently only a 4 attack unit, but it's going to be exhausted, and through the Emperor's Warrant, it's going to be forced to deal its 4 points of damage to the Blazing Zoanthrope, and that's going to make it far less likely that our Tyranid player could win this first planet, or if he does, it could mean that he's going to be forced to use, some Genestealers that he doesn't have at the moment. So the Blazing Zoanthrope is outright destroyed, and now the Virulent Spore Sacks are going to be the only ready unit controlled by our Tyranid player here. So let's see how things go. Travis is indicating it's Guy's action. Guy is going to use his battle ability here, the Virulent Spore Sacks, to deal out a point of damage to each of those units. We see the Rockcrete Bunker once again doing work. It spares the anxious infantry platoon a little bit of damage, and now I'll just be incredibly curious to see, is this the moment where we see the invasive Genestealer, or might we simply see a Genestealer Prowler instead? Definitely a lot of interesting effects. Okay, so there we go. We see the Genestealer Prowler at this freshly infested planet, and it's going to have the opportunity to either try to kill off the anxious infantry platoon or the Enginseer Augur, but there's certainly a plethora of shield cards sitting here in Travis's hands for him to basically block off that ability. But it's a little bit difficult to tell here during Octagon. I guess all of this was happening prior to the onset of the combat round, and we see a preemptive barrage give ranged to the Enginseer and the Anxious Infantry platoon. So this is going to be attacking for 3 at ranged, and the platoon is going to be attacking for 4 at ranged. So we see the Enginseer Augur exhaust. They're potentially going to be killing the Genestealer Prowler. There's nothing in hand that our Tyranid player can do to prevent that effect. Certainly he could ambush additional Genestealers into play, but then that makes it all the less likely that he'll be able to win Iridial. But let's see how things go down. So Guy is pondering for a moment, perhaps trying to give the illusion that he has 2 shield icon cards in hand, just to play a little bit of mind games with his opponent. Certainly probably not a bad idea. Interestingly, yeah, okay, so maybe we were just a little bit mistaken once again, and perhaps that's the not using proxies thing coming into play. So the Genestealer Prowler is going to be dealt a lethal amount of damage, and that's going to be that copy of Regeneration still sitting in Glaiveguy's hand there. So the Anxious Infantry platoon is now going to be very free to get in a shot at the Yumgarl Genestealer, and what really kind of sucks is because there's no Synapse unit present, it's only got 4 hit points, and even though it has regeneration affixed to it, if the Anxious Infantry platoon were to attack for 4, and our Tyranid player could not shield, there'd be no opportunity to benefit from regeneration. So that would have been a fantastic opportunity to potentially have it killed off. Oh, I'm sorry. So, God, I must have been misspeaking for quite a long time in this video. Regeneration gives the attached unit 2 additional hit points. So my mistake there. Regeneration does have the opportunity to activate because the Ymgarl Gene Stealer had that +2 hit point reservoir, so my sincerest apologies. It's definitely not just our players that are making slight mistakes. So again, I apologize, and that is going to bring us to the end of the combat round unless we see our Tyranid player ambush additional units into play. We could see the invasive Gene Stealers touch down. They could immediately kill the Engine Seer Augur. They could potentially kill the Anxious Infantry platoon, and then the platoon is going to be forced to stay, and then the Gene Stealer here is going to have the opportunity to swing for 4. So it looks as though glaiveguy indicates that he's going to stay. Travis has to stay since he's at a green planet. It's very curious in my mind that we didn't actually see our Tyranid basically ambush another unit into play, but the Anxious Infantry platoon is going to be handily destroyed by the Ymgarl Gene Stealer. The Engine Seer itself is only going to be able to attack for 3. There's nothing that our AM player can do to augment that effect, and that means that 5 damage is not going to be sufficient to kill the Gene Stealer, but I happen to space that there's a Catachan outpost sitting right here that's going to raise the Engine Seer Augur's attack value to 5, and because we do not see a 2-shield icon card in our Tyranid player's hand, that means that the Ymgarl Gene Stealer is going to be destroyed, and that is going to be a Planet 1 by Travis. That's going to be another green strong point icon for his collection, and that's going to be potentially quite handily the opponent's victory condition blocked off. So let's see how this works. We still could see glaiveguy ambush a unit into play like the invasive Gene Stealers or a Gene Stealer Prowler. Either one would, well, I guess it would have to be the invasive Gene Stealers, or it could be the Prowler, and then the Prowler just attacks twice. So I suppose we will probably see the Gene Stealer Prowler drop into play. So let's see how things break down. It's going to be the... okay, so we actually just see the invasive Gene Stealer used now. In all honesty, I think this was a suboptimal play with that Gene Stealer Prowler. Well, I guess we were doing this specifically to spare the life of the Ymgarl Gene Stealers, so I apologize, Guy. I think that was probably the correct move. We see an Inquisitorial Fortress put into play, very interestingly, after the Engine Seer Augur leaves play, and now that's going to allow, should he choose to do so, Broderick to be able to route a unit from that planet. So let's see. The Tyranid indicates that he's not going to trigger that planet, but he is going to be able to win our planet Yvonne, and that's going to put him at 2 red and 2 blue icons. So if somehow our Tyranid player manages to win at Iridial during the following turn, that could be the game for him. And certainly, even though he doesn't have the resources to pay for a tremendous number of effects, our Tyranid player could still pull this out, especially if that Anxious Infantry platoon ends up being killed by a Gene Stealer so that we can see Gene Implantation. But we now finally see combat break out at our planet number 2. The Toxic Venomthrope is going to take a single point of damage, and now Broderick Worr is likely going to be able to finish off that unit. What's really too bad is even if there were no shield icon cards in hand at all, controlled by our player here, our Tyranid player, the Inquisitorial Fortress is still going to be able to get rid of whatever Tyranid units get ambushed into play, so there can't really be too many shenanigans here. So very interestingly, it looks as though Guy throws away his copy of Regeneration just to spare the life of the Toxic Venomthrope. So the Rattling Deadeye was actually attacking for 2 because it's sitting there at a green planet, and I'm not exactly sure what Guy was hoping to accomplish by discarding that shield card there. Perhaps he just wants Broderick Worr to be exhausted so that he can potentially attack Broderick for 2, or he could potentially attack the Anxious Infantry platoon for 2 and then use Gene Implantation, but he doesn't have enough resources for all of those effects. So I guess let's see how this breaks down. Glaiveguy could do his Gene Stealer Prowler, then he could do a No Mercy with Subject Omega, but that's not going to be a sufficient number of damage to bloody Broderick, and as soon as combat ends, that's going to be Iridial activated to heal Broderick back to fully hale. So that was a very interesting choice there, but despite my bit of being perplexed, I guess Travis indicates no actions. Is Guy going to take an action? If he does not, okay, so he puts a copy of the Gene Stealer Prowler into play, and is he going to try to kill the Anxious Infantry platoon, and then he's going to use No Mercy to ensure a kill on that unit? It's a damn shame he doesn't have enough left for Gene Implantation. So we are going to see the Gene Stealer Prowler attack. I guess we did not see the Inquisitorial Fortress used. I guess there's still time in case our players are acting a little bit too rash. There we go. We see the Summary Execution discarded as shields. And are we going to see the No Mercy play guarantee a kill or not? I definitely think now would be the time to do it. Okay, I guess Glaiveguy decides he's not going to, and that is going to bring him to the end of a combat round. So the Gene Stealer Prowler is not going to be able to retreat, and I guess if it does retreat, it would just be immediately destroyed. But Broderick and the other units here are going to have the option of just outright killing it. So a couple very interesting plays, and I'm just very curious to see how things break down. I think if it were me, I'd have been very desirous of being able to kill off that Anxious Infantry platoon, but I'd have probably overvalued Iridial. Well, it's not the opponent's victory condition, so I guess it's not the end-all, be-all that you win at that planet, but that Gene Stealer Prowler is killed, and interestingly, that's actually going to be the Anxious Infantry platoon that is healed, and not Broderick Worr, so a very curious choice indeed, but that will set up Travis very nicely to likely win Iridial during the following round, and then if he can manage to win another planet like Taurus here, then that could well be the game for him. We see Subject Omega deals out 2 points of damage to the Sanctioned Psyker there at planet number 5, and then the Sanctioned Psyker basically swings at him for 1 in return, just because, like I spaced myself, it's actually sitting at a green planet. So the Sanctioned Psyker is not going to be able to retreat. The only shield card in hand is going to be an incredibly important event. I cannot imagine that Travis is going to want to use that as shields, but seeing as how Barless is on the line, he may opt to do so just because of that random card discard. But it's going to be Subject Omega's opportunity to attack once again. I think he'll likely kill off the Sanctioned Psyker, but let's see how it goes. It's going to be 2. Okay, so the Sanctioned Psyker is going to be dead, and let's see that random card discard. Is it going to be Preemptive Barrage, or is it going to be Void Pirate? For our Tyranid players' sake, it had better be the Preemptive Barrage, but it is a copy of Void Pirate. Still useful, but not nearly as valuable, in my opinion, as that Preemptive Barrage. So, as we're going into our HQ phase, our players are going to have quite a few resources, but not a ton of cards. Depending on which player you're referring to, Travis is going to have 7 resources and 3 cards. He'll have another copy of Rockcrete Bunker. He'll have 2 Preemptive Barrage, but he has definitely just been kind of running into a complete dearth of army units throughout the course of this game, so maybe he'll adjust his deck accordingly afterward. Like, these Rockcrete Bunkers are certainly handy, but with so few units to have them work with, it just seems like you're maybe not getting that much value out of them. Glaiveguy has 4 resources and 7 cards. He came across a copy of his Digestion Pool, which is yet another card that works fantastically well in regard to benefiting as much as you can from the infestation mechanic. Whenever you deploy a Tyranid unit to an infested planet, you exhaust that support, you drop its cost by 2. That is absolutely fantastic in just getting some of these Tyranids into play for cheap. It's great in kind of masking how many resources you have available to ambush units into play. A Yumgarl Gene Stealer would only be a 3-cost unit. These Gene Stealer Prowlers would be free. So it's definitely a pretty powerful effect, but our Tyranid has kind of run out of effects to use to infest planets. But we see glaiveguy put into play a Tyranid warrior at planet number 3. He's nicely constructed a little bit of a wall at his opponent's first victory condition here, Taurus. And it seems as though both of our players have passed at this point, so they're going to decide where exactly do they want to go. Elwith is probably the safest location for Broderick Worr, and for glaiveguy, if he manages to, I think he's probably gonna, yes, he's gonna set himself up at planet number 2 here. So very interestingly, if glaiveguy can win Elwith, then that's going to be the game for him the following round. Interestingly, Travis goes up against the volatile Pyrovore, and this is an incredibly dangerous place for him to go, just because I guess if he can manage to win Taurus, that'll be 3 cards or 3 resources, but Broderick Worr can only deal out 2 points of damage. I guess he's relying on the Inquisitorial Fortress to get rid of the volatile Pyrovore to rout it from that planet, and then he'll be able to... Okay, actually, that was a very, very intelligent move there. So Iridial is going to be won entirely uncontested by Travis, and I'm forgetting my sequence of planets here. So that is going to banish basically all damage tokens from Broderick Worr. We have an incredible number of invasive Gene Stealers sitting here in Glaiveguy's hand. That is incredibly nasty. We even got a copy of the Yumgarl Gene Stealer, another Gene Stealer Prowler, but note that none of these planets happen to be infested. So if Guy is not running copies of... I think it's called, it's not Synaptic Link, Spore Chimney, where during your HQ phase you can just point and infest a target planet. That could definitely be fantastic for him, just because he's got so many cards that really benefit from Subject Omega's ability. So I'll be very curious to see how battle breaks down. At planet number 2, it's going to be Guy's Opportunity, entirely uncontested. He fetches another copy of Volatile Pyrovore, which could likely afford him the opportunity to win at that planet. Interestingly here, we see Travis throw out an apology. I guess he doesn't even need to use the Inquisitorial Fortress. Note that our Tyranid player doesn't have any shields in hand, and that's going to be a Catachan Outpost, augmenting Broderick Worr to an attack of 4. He's going to be able to swing, kill the Volatile Pyrovore. Broderick is going to take 3 full points of damage. He'll be at just as many points of damage he had prior to Iridial, and then he'll be able to trigger the effect of Taurus, and I can only imagine that he's going to be drawing himself additional cards, and then it's all going to come down to, is Subject Omega going to be able to basically defend Elwith against his opposition here? So we actually see a Rockcrete Bunker pull 1 point of damage off of Broderick Worr after it kills that Volatile Pyrovore. And now I'll just be very, very curious to see what all our players draw in regard to cards, and then what they put into play at our soon-to-be planet number 1. We do have this copy of the Elysian Assault Team that can interplay. We could see Summary Execution, which could turn this planet green at the cost of, say, this Rattling Deadeye, so all the non-Broderick Worr AM units are attacking for an additional 1. We're going to see Regeneration be able to pull a couple damage off this Yumgarl Gene Stealer. I believe it was not used during this round. It was just sent to the planet erroneously exhausted, I believe, but whether it was or not. So Taurus is going to be, let's see, so I'll indicate for Glaiveguy agreed. I will say erroneous exhaustion. So he's going to be able to strip damage off of his Yumgarl Gene Stealer and basically bring it back up to full. But in any case, we see Taurus activated. This is going to be quite a few very valuable units. We see a Steel Legion Chimera, which is 2/4 that prevents damage dealt out to non-vehicles. Note that it can be targeted by this gene implantation, and then that could be a great benefit for our Tyranid player. We also see the signature attachment, the Commissarial Bolt Pistol, and we see our HQ phase come and go, and this is likely going to be the last round of the game, unless Travis manages to block off Elwith. Then his opponent, our Tyranid Guy, he's going to win. But he's got a copy of the Commissarial Bolt Pistol. Broderick already has 2 points of damage, so I think he might end up saving this as shields, but it gives his Commissar, his Warlord, a +1 attack bonus, bringing him up to 3, and then as soon as an army unit at that planet that he controls leaves play, you deal 1 damage to a target enemy army unit. So Travis certainly has more than enough resources to pay for all of these different cards. He's got enough preemptive barrages where a lot of these could be attacking at range. He could put out Rattling Deadeye, Talon Raiders. It's going to be a little bit tricky for him to try to invest sufficiently into Eloith to be able to win it, but he'll also want to be able to win at Taurus. Our Tyranid player also has a wealth of options, but not nearly enough resources to pay for all of them. Like, look at all these 3-cost army units, look at all these different incredibly expensive effects, but he's only got 5 resources to pay for them. He could do a Volatile Pyrovore and a Spore Burst to do another Volatile Pyrovore at the first planet. That definitely would not be the worst thing in the world, but this Inquisitorial Fortress could quite nicely remove likely the Yumgarl Gene Stealer from that planet, and I'll just be very curious indeed to see if our Tyranid can come up with enough to kind of block off his opposition. I think the summary execution used on this Rattling Deadeye could be absolutely fantastic. This Rattling Deadeye would be attacking for 2 at ranged, the Steel Legion Chimera would be 3, the Talon Raiders would be 3 at ranged. With Commissarial Bolt Pistol, Broderick Worr would also be attacking for 3 at ranged, and you could definitely just lay waste to all the Tyranids sitting at this planet. I guess our Tyranid player is opting just to play a Gene Stealer Prowler to try to leave enough resources for a Gene Implantation, which is definitely going to be a big swing. If you can kill an enemy unit and return it into play under your control, that could just make a tremendous difference. So Guy has passed, and now it's going to be Travis's opportunity to use the remainder of the round to completely run amok. We see a copy of Void Pirate put out to planet number 2, which is Taurus. We see that Rattling Deadeye, the Talon Raiders, and the Steel Legion Chimera all touch down on planet number 1. Travis still has 5 resources left, so I would imagine we'll see the Commissarial Bolt Pistol and these 2 copies of Preemptive Barrage, but all the same, we might see the Commissarial Bolt Pistol used just to keep units in play, but it's going to be very tricky. Like, let's say if Broderick shows up at this planet with the Bolt Pistol attached, which we do see it played, you definitely want to prioritize Broderick, but since that Steel Legion Chimera is sitting at the planet, you're going to be shaving points of damage off of Broderick each time he gets attacked, or if you attack the Steel Legion Chimera, when that leaves play, the Commissarial Bolt Pistol activates, Summary Execution, killing that Rattling Deadeye is going to activate, so this is definitely one incredible game here, and let's see how things resolve. I think both players are almost undoubtedly going to go to planet number 1. I think Subject Omega wants to risk being bloodied just to ensure that he's going to be able to contribute to the war effort here, so we see... Very interestingly, we see Subject Omega go to planet number 2. I guess he's going to block off the Void Pirate there just to try to starve his opponent of cards. We see another copy of the Elysian Assault Team, which is potentially going to be critically important. When these AM units leave play, they could be replaced. And of course, if they're sitting at a green planet, so long as Broderick Worr himself is Hail, all of those units are going to be getting a +1 attack bonus. So glaiveguy ended up getting only 1 resource. He got a copy of, he got 3 cards. And now let's see what exactly he can do. He's got Dark Cunning, he's got Spore Burst. Both of those are incredibly powerful cards, but let's see how combat breaks down. The initiative is going to be in the hands of Broderick Worr because there's no Tyranid Warlord present. We see a Catachan Outpost augment the Rattling Deadeye. It's going to be attacking for 3. I think if we were going to see Summary Execution, there would be no better time than now, and in fact, I think that's what I would do. Get rid of that Rattling Deadeye, fire off the Commissarial Bolt Pistol, and then shoot something with the Deadeye, but let's see how this goes. The Rattling Deadeye is going to be only attacking for 3. at the Volatile Pyrovore, so that's a very interesting choice. We could see a 1 shield icon card discarded in order to negate that attack, and indeed that is what we see. So the Volatile Pyrovore is going to take 2 points of damage, and now, unless we see a preemptive barrage or 2 played, I suppose we could just see 1. So this is kind of very strange. I suppose why use Summary Execution on that Rattling Deadeye as opposed to this Rattling Deadeye here, but that's going to be the Rattling Deadeye gone. The Bolt Pistol is going to fire at the Volatile Pyrovore, and that's going to be okay. Well, I suppose that was pretty clever, regardless as to how it happened, because it's not an attack that's going to be killing off the Volatile Pyrovore, so I still think I would have swapped the order of those two effects, but the Volatile Pyrovore, I can't imagine that that is going to go unshielded, so that is not an attack. So let's see one of these shield cards. We've got No Mercy, which Subject Omega will probably want at least 1 copy saved for himself. So let's see. No Mercy is an option. Dark Cunning is also an option, but there are 2 resources, so you might not want to get rid of that. I still think Gene Implantation could just be of the paramount importance to hold on to, but when exactly are we going to see this Inquisitorial Fortress rout that big, powerful Gene Stealer? And even if we do, either of these other Gene Stealers could still be doing a little bit of damage, but there we finally see that copy of Preemptive Barrage. Looks as though it was indeed a copy of No Mercy discarded to preserve the life of the Volatile Pyrovore. That's going to be the Steel Legion Chimera and Broderick Worr and the Tallarn Raiders, all benefiting from that effect. So the Tallarn Raiders are going to be attacking for 3. The Steel Legion Chimera is going to be attacking for 3, as is Broderick, because Summary Execution is still in effect. So I'm just going to remind our players to remember Summary Execution. So that's going to be a lot of additional points of damage. But let's see what these targets are. So there's certainly a wealth of different AM attackers, but let's see. Which targets should we single out first? I think the Gene Stealers are going to be priority targets. Like you'll want to kill the Invasive, you'll want to kill the Gene Stealer Prowler just to prevent Gene Implantation. We're going to see an attack of 3 go out against the Invasive Gene Stealers there. They've only got 3 HP since their reaction is not in effect at the moment. We could see Spore Burst discarded as shields, but what exactly are we going to see? I guess Travis does have a second copy of Preemptive Barrage, but he's run out of units to use that ability with. So will he use Spore Burst? Will he use Dark Cunning? The Invasive Gene Stealer is at risk of being outright killed. So let's see. Some sort of shield for Guy. Guy throws out one of his copies of Dark Cunning. I believe he no longer has any of those in hand. So now I suppose he's just saving his resources for this Gene Implantation, which could make all the difference for him. So the Steel Legion Chimera only managed to do 2 points of damage to the Invasive Gene Stealer. And now the Tallarn Raiders could be attacking for 3, or Broderick Worr could be attacking for 3. But the Prowler's going to be a priority target, as are the Invasive Gene Stealers. So let's see how things break down. We could easily see the Gene Stealers killed, the Prowler killed, we could see the Gene Stealer routed, then we could see something happen to the Volatile Pyrovore. A lot of different options here. Broderick Worr himself is going to be attacking the Gene Stealer Prowler, so he's threatening 3 points of damage. We would have to see a 2 shield icon card just to save that unit. So will we see the Spore Burst discarded or not? Definitely things are looking increasingly grim here for our Tyranid, but what do we see in regard to shields? We see that copy of Spore Burst used, so that's only going to be one copy, well, one damage, dealt to the Gene Stealer Prowler, and now I think that if our Tyranid ends up losing this planet, he's going to be facing a hell of a hard time trying to win at Taurus to block off his opponent's victory condition, especially, I mean, note these two copies of the Elysian Assault Team are incredibly nasty. Add a green planet, Anxious Infantry Platoon, add a green planet. Of course, Preemptive Barrage just makes things go from bad to worse. We see the Tallarn Raiders attack for 3 at the Volatile Pyrovore, so an interesting target there, but we're going to see those Tallarn Raiders end up being killed. I suppose that was done just because they'd end up becoming useless if Broderick Worr happens to retreat, and of course when those Raiders die in killing the Pyrovore, that means that the Commissarial Bolt Pistol is going to be able to trigger and deal out 1 point of damage to the invasive Gene Stealers, and those Gene Stealers are outright killed, and that means it's just going to be the Gene Stealer Prowler left. Interestingly, we see a copy of the Elysian Assault Team put into play, and Broderick Worr still has the initiative, so he's going to be able to attack for 3, and he's going to be able to kill off the copy of the Gene Stealer Prowler here, so some pretty spectacular play for days coming from Travis here, and Broderick Worr is just proving himself to be an incredible powerhouse. And to seal the deal, of course, there we go. We see that Inquisitorial Fortress. So goodbye, Yumgarl Gene Stealer. Your 6 attack will be missed. The Inquisitorial Fortress is gone, but that's going to be a 6 attack, 6 hit point regenerating unit banished to Guy's HQ, and that is going to afford Travis the opportunity to trigger Eloith, and now he's quite nicely going to block off his opponent's victory condition, so an incredible play there. We are going to see battle progress. We're going to be moving on to planet number 2, and that is going to be the opportunity here for Subject Omega to kill off that Void Pirate, which does not have any attack bonus. It's a neutral unit, not an AM unit. And basically, Taurus will give Guy the possibility of accruing 3 additional resources to try to put some of these cards into play, but it is going to be just incredibly difficult for him to try to overcome this just onslaught of AM units. And considering that there's the Anxious Infantry Platoon that'll be entering play, there'll be Preemptive Barrage with Broderick Worr, it just seems like things could be an absolute nightmare, and note that that is a naturally green planet. So, things are looking all the way bad for our Tyranid players. Subject Omega does manage to kill off that copy of Void Pirate, and he is going to be able to likely generate 3 resources for himself, but that is just incredible. I'm a little bit at a loss for words for how powerful Broderick Worr is, and that's going to bring us to another HQ phase. It's going to be the last round of the game. It's going to be 4 resources and 2 cards for both of our players, and whether it's our Gene Stealer or our Commissar, whomever ends up winning at Taurus is going to take home the game. So let's hope for our Tyranid's sake that he ends up with something that could potentially allow him to infest Taurus, something like a Scything Hormigaunt, so he could put into play his Digestion Pool and potentially play something for pretty cheap. Looks as though we actually see a copy of, well, he does have a Scything Hormigaunt, but he gets a Ripper Swarm and a Spore Chimney, which that Spore Chimney is not going to do him any good whatsoever, and he's got a limited 0-cost Ripper Swarm, which I'm sure he'll be happy to see. So let's see. Travis ended up getting a copy of the Rattling Deadeye, which will be attacking for 2 naturally ranged, and we also see a Sanctioned Psyker. So we see the Anxious Infantry Platoon put into play at planet number 1. Note that Broderick will have the initiative token at the first planet, and he'll be able to do a lot of attacking at ranged. He also came across a copy of the Inquisitorial Fortress, which means that's going to be able to remove that Yumgarl Gene Stealer once again from play, so that was a lot of resources invested at one unit that is definitely just getting bullied around this entire game. So Travis has put out that copy of the Anxious Infantry Platoon. It's now going to be Glaiveguy's opportunity to play. He could do 3 Invasive Gene Stealers all in a row and kill the Anxious Infantry Platoon. That definitely wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to do, but he's going to need at least 1 resource to benefit from this gene implantation. So even though things are looking pretty grim, I don't think things are entirely lost for our Tyranid player, just because that is an absolute mountain of HP if he puts out 3 4 hit point units. Although because they're not being ambushed into play, they would drop back down to 3 hit points. Interestingly, our Tyranid has opted to put into play a copy of Digestion Pool. I can only imagine that this means he's going to be putting out a copy of the Scything Hormagaunts and doing a little bit of deploy stalling here. He's undoubtedly going to put his Ripper Swarm at that first... Well, I guess the Digestion Pool is a limited card, so that means that he's not going to do his Digestion Pool, but it's going to be up to Travis to take an action. All right, so it looks as though Glaiveguy is back from a bit of an AFK, and I believe where we left off, it's going to be Travis's opportunity to deploy. So we see a Rattling Deadeye put out to planet number 1, and now it's all going to be up to Guy. How on earth is he going to try to respond to this? I think the perfect way to respond to a Rattling Deadeye would be an Invasive Gene Stealer. It's going to interplay, it's going to immediately kill the Rattling Deadeye, but we could also see a copy of the Scything Hormagaunts put out to that planet. They'll infest it, and then, yep, that is exactly what we're going to see. So the Scything Hormagaunts are going to infest that planet, then we'll see Digestion Pool used to put into play an Invasive Gene Stealer for 1. That'll drop the Rattling Deadeye to 0 HP. Neither of these Rockcrete bunkers is going to be able to preserve the life of the Rattling here, and with gene implantation, I think there's a chance that our Tyranid player could come around and potentially win this one. But we do see that copy of the Inquisitorial Fortress put into play in the HQ of our Broderick Worr player. We see a Brood Chamber, which is very interesting. I've not seen this used by a Tyranid player before. It costs 0. You exhaust that support to give a target army unit you control a keyword printed on a target enemy unit at that planet. Note that that is printed on a target enemy unit and not granted. So that means, I guess, that this Rattling Deadeye, yeah, so it only lasts until the end of the phase. So I guess that Brood Chamber is just going to be a deploy stall. It's not, well, I guess this Rattling Deadeye that's going to be showing up exhausted will be able to confer its ranged keyword to any Tyranid unit. But let's see how things break down. Travis has passed. He's only got 1 resource left, but that's enough for his preemptive barrage. I don't think he's going to be winning command on any planets, so he's just going to have to make do with that preemptive barrage. There we see the Invasive Gene Stealer drop down, immediately kill off the copy of that Rattling Deadeye. So that was a very nice little swing for our Tyranid player. We see that Digestion Pool afforded him the opportunity to put that into play for 1. What could he do? He could do the Yumgarl Gene Stealer, which would be attacking for 6. Potentially at ranged, but there's that Inquisitorial Fortress that's going to be able to remove one of those from the planet, so I think it's going to come down to he's going to be getting 3 cards and 1 resource, so he could do the Yumgarl Gene Stealer and then do Gene Implantation. He could do an Invasive Gene Stealer and then hold on to his resources, so I don't necessarily think it's the most... Well, he doesn't have the best options in the world, but I think it's going to be the Yumgarl Gene Stealer, and then whatever ends up... You know, I think it's going to come down to, will Inquisitorial Fortress route this Gene Stealer that has regeneration, or will it route the ready Gene Stealer that maybe has the ranged keyword? Or I suppose one of these 2 units could also get the ranged keyword, but I'll be very, very interested to see how all of this breaks down. And I think it's still going to be very, very difficult for our Tyranid to pull through without as many resources as, you know, without an unlimited number of resources, there's just so much more he could be doing, but he just cannot afford to put into play. So let's see how it goes. It's still going to be up to Guy. Let's see that Yumgarl Gene Stealer. I really think that's probably his only option. It looks as though glaiveguy actually passes. So I suppose I happen to just space the fact that these Gene Stealers can be ambushed into play because we've got an infestation token sitting at that planet. So let's see what exactly he does with his actions. If he's going to be able to win one resource, he knows that he could potentially put into play 2 invasive Gene Stealers, and I guess 2 2/4 units is going to beat 1 6/4 unit that could be routed. And of course, once he steals the ranged keyword from this Rattling Deadeye, he can comfortably drop his invasive Gene Stealer into play and kill off that unit. And if somehow the stars aligned and he'd be able to kill off the Anxious Infantry platoon, Gene Implantation would be just fantastic used with that. But that's going to be 3 additional cards and 1 resource for glaiveguy. To his dismay, I'm sure he didn't actually draw any shields at all, just a couple of useless army units. Another copy of the Yumgarl Gene Stealer that he doesn't have nearly enough resources to put into play. And now that's going to be battle at our first planet here. So at the onset of battle, there's not going to be any abilities that proc. We've got Subject, Omega, and Broderick Worr all sitting here at this planet. Will we see the Brood Chamber give ranged or not? The Inquisitorial Fortress, we see the Catachan Outpost exhaust. That's going to augment the Anxious Infantry platoon up to a grand total of 6 attack value. And is that going to be Subject Omega Bloodied? During our ranged skirmish round, it seems as though my, wanting to get all my units out there prior to doing the ambush thing may not have been the worst idea in the world, but, there's still going to be action windows for units to be ambushed into play, but let's see exactly what happens here. So, the Anxious Infantry platoon is going to be attacking for 6. We've yet to see Travis do his preemptive barrage. He's only got 2 units to benefit from that. But let's see it. I suppose he might be waiting for his opponent to do something like put an invasive Gene Stealer into play, kill a Rattling Deadeye, and then he could drop a... Well, I guess the Rattling Deadeye is not a soldier, so it wouldn't put an Elysian Assault team into play. But if he were to, say, kill this Elysian Assault team, he could put another one into play and then use Preemptive Barrage to attack with that. But glaiveguy is pondering his actions. He's still got this Brood Chamber to give a unit ranged. And let's see how things break down. How will Guy respond? And then when will Travis give his units ranged? We see that copy of Brood Chamber exhaust, and that's going to be the Scything Hormagaunts, gaining the ranged keyword. They're going to be able to attack for 2, and we could see the Inquisitorial Fortress remove them from that planet, or we could see the Scything Hormagaunts gunned down by a ranged unit or 2 on the AM player's side, or we could see, under ideal situations for the Tyranid player, the Scything Hormagaunts deal 2 points of damage to the Anxious Infantry platoon, and then an invasive Gene Stealer splash down to finish dealing out that damage. So I think if Travis wants to play very cautiously, there we go. That's going to be that copy of the Preemptive Barrage. So is it going to be Broderick Worr taking a shot, or is it going to be the Anxious Infantry platoon, which is attacking for 6? I can only imagine it's going to be Broderick Worr attacking for 3 at the Scything Hormagaunts. Of course, there's no way of Travis to know that there are no 2 shield icon cards in his opponent's hand, but I think it only makes sense to, basically distribute your attacks. Warlord versus Scything Hormagaunts, and then the Infantry platoon against Subject Omega. I guess it's a little bit tricky here in regard to what you want to do first. Like, you could try to bloody the Warlord first and disallow any kind of ambushing of units into play. There we go. We see an invasive Gene Stealer drop down, and what is that going to kill? It's going to affect the Steel Legion Chimera, which is going to be pretty interesting here. And I guess I forgot, in regard to if the Scything Hormagaunts would have hit the infantry platoon, they'd have only dealt 1 point of damage because of the Steel Legion Chimera. So my sincerest apologies, as our match is growing increasingly long. It looks as though my concentration is wavering ever so slightly, but the Steel Legion Chimera is going to be down to 3 hit points. And let's see what exactly happens. So we've still got the Anxious Infantry Platoon and Broderick Worr that can be attacking at ranged. We've also got this Invasive Gene Stealer. We could see a second Invasive Gene Stealer interplay. So what exactly is it going to be? There we see a second copy. I can only imagine it's also going to be targeting the Steel Legion Chimera. And now our Imperial Guard player is entirely out of shields. So even though our Astra Militarum player will have the opportunity to attack first, our Tyranid player will be able to threaten killing that Steel Legion Chimera. Interestingly, we actually saw the Elysian Assault team targeted by that -1 HP, and that would allow the Elysian Assault team to interplay, so we could have seen an attack, at ranged, and then we could have seen the Elysian Assault team drop it into play to attack first, since the Astra Militarum player has initiative. But for some reason, looks like that did not end up being the case. Makes sense in my mind, but let's see how things go. Note that our Imperial Guard player also has 2 Rockcrete bunkers in addition to the Steel Legion Chimera, and let's see how this goes. It's Travis's opportunity to take a shot before this ranged Scything Hormagaunt has the opportunity. So, let's see. Travis, what are you going to shoot? If it were me, I'd be Broderick Worr trying to kill the Scything Hormagaunts, and the Anxious Infantry Platoon for 6 trying to bloody our subject Omega here. So there we go. We see Broderick take a shot at the Scything Hormagaunts, and I suppose, now that I stop to think about it, Subject Omega is not as appealing a target as either of these invasive gene stealers here. So let's see how it goes. The Scything Hormagaunt is killed, and now it's going to be the Anxious Infantry Platoon, ideally attacking one of these augmented copies of the invasive gene stealers. So it's certainly, a 2-3, a 2-3, a 2-4 into 2-4 for our Tyranid. The Inquisitorial Fortress is going to be able to get rid of this Yumgarl gene stealer. And let's see how the remainder of combat plays out. We've only got 2 1-shield icon cards for our Tyranid player. We've got no shield icon cards for our Astra Militarum player. So Guy has indicated that he is done with actions. There we go. That's going to be the Anxious Infantry Platoon killing that copy of the invasive gene stealers. And now, since our Astra Militarum player is going to be entirely out of resources, that's going to be, well, not out of resources. Since the AM player is out of units to attack, it's going to be up to our Tyranid to start dealing a tremendous amount of damage. So he's going to be able to get off 3 2-attack swings. The Steel Legion Chimera would take 2 attacks before it's killed, unless we see these Rockcrete bunkers activate, and then that will be all 3 of these units attacking just to kill the Steel Legion Chimera. And then things are going to be looking very interesting indeed for our Tyranid player, and given Broderick's presence, given the power within this, warlord here. Interestingly, we see an invasive gene stealer. Okay, maybe we see a mind changed. No. Okay, so looks like glaiveguy is maybe going to change his mind there, so he's not going to be attacking Broderick Worr. He requests a takeback, and yes, owing to the length of this game, I think everyone involved is losing a little bit of focus. So instead, the invasive gene stealers take a swing at the Steel Legion Chimera. That's going to be 2 points of damage, unless, of course, we see the Rockcrete bunker used to absorb a point of damage. So, let's see if he ends up using that effect or not. Okay, so the Steel Legion Chimera takes 2 points of damage. I hope that Travis is well aware of these Rockcrete bunkers sitting in his HQ, But let's see how the remainder of combat resolves. It's going to be Subject Omega that can also attack for 2. Same thing for the Invasive Gene Stealer. What's interesting is that the Steel Legion Chimera, I guess maybe we were saving those Rockcrete bunkers for something else. But let's see some of these Tyranids exhaust. We see that Invasive Gene Stealer's attack. And that's going to be the Rockcrete bunker. I guess both of them are going to be activating, and that is going to negate that Invasive Gene Stealer's attack entirely. That's going to be the first copy of the Rockcrete bunker destroyed, and now it's going to be Subject Omega's opportunity to seal the deal. And as soon as that Steel Legion Chimera leaves play, that's going to be the Commissarial Bolt Pistol dealing out a point of damage to any of these lingering units. But what exactly is he going to choose? The Inquisitorial Fortress, I can only imagine, is going to remove that Gene Stealer. Looks as though we've picked the weaker of the Gene Stealers. All right, so after another bit of an AFK, Guy has returned, and that's going to be the Commissarial Bolt Pistol managing to successfully deal out 1 point of damage to that original copy of the Invasive Gene Stealers, and Guy indicates that he is now done with actions. It's going to be up to the end of the combat round here. All of these units are going to be readying, and it's going to be our Astra Militarum player's opportunity to attack first. He's got kind of a wealth of different units present at that planet, but what exactly is Guy going to target? Definitely some, well, the probably number one priority target's going to be killing off the Invasive Gene Stealer that only has 2 hit points left, and then Subject Omega, followed by the Invasive Gene Stealers. And of course, this Inquisitorial Fortress is going to be blasting off at any moment, just like Team Rocket, to banish Subject Omega X, or not, sorry, to banish the Yumgarl Gene Stealer from that planet. But let's see how it's going to break down. Travis has got the initiative. Is he going to take an action, or is he going to attack? So, let's see it. Travis indicates that he has no actions, which is, once again, kind of an interesting choice. I don't know why you're waiting on your Inquisitorial Fortress, but the Anxious Infantry Platoon are going to be attacking for 4. The Invasive Gene Stealers are outright destroyed. Even with a 2-shield icon card, they would not have been able to be preserved. There we go. We finally see the Inquisitorial Fortress remove the Yumgarl Gene Stealer from that planet. I think it maybe got a chance to kill 1 unit in this entire video, but let's see how the remainder of combat resolves. There's only 2 units left for Guy. He's got a 2-3 and he's got a 2-4. It's looking incredibly grim, especially considering that there's an Elysian assault team here in play that could splash down at the planet and attack for 2. Broderick Worr is going to take 2 points of damage because he doesn't have any opportunity to shield, but Broderick in return is going to be able to attack for 3. So let's see how this is going to break down. As soon as Broderick is banished from the planet, all of these units are going to get far less powerful, and if we see the end of a combat round occur, that means that these Anxious Infantry platoons are going to be forced to retreat, and that means that if our AM player cannot actually afford to keep them at the planet, all right, there we go. So very wise play on part of our Astra Militarum player that could have easily cost him the game if Broderick would have been bloodied, and then we'd have seen, say, the Rattling Deadeye killed and then hit the end of the combat round and both platoons would have run away. So very wise on behalf of Travis, and easily a mistake, I think, during a tournament that could have been a tremendous upset and cost someone the game. But since that combat turn is done, it's going to be the Invasive Gene Stealers taking a swing at the Rattling Deadeye, which would have been attacking for 2, but it's now banished from that planet. And let's see how things are going to finish up here. The Anxious Infantry Platoon, I assume, is going to be bloodying Subject Omega. Absolutely nothing that our Tyranid player can do because he's only got 1 shield icon cards in hand. So there we go. We were playing as the Swarm Lord as the proxy there. So Subject Omega is now banished from that planet. And that's going to be a new combat round. And this is going to be both copies of the Anxious Infantry Platoon being able to attack for 4. If either of them were somehow killed, that would be an Elysian Assault team being put into play. Fortunately for Travis's sake, he cannot retreat, and he is not forced to retreat because of that forced reaction. I can't imagine that either players are gonna have any actions apart from just attacking. Glaiveguy calls out, "Earn your victory," and that's exactly what we're going to see. So we see the Anxious Infantry platoon take a swing at that Invasive Gene Stealers. Will we see a one shield icon card? Yep, there we go. We see that gene implantation used as shields just to be stubborn on behalf of our Tyranid player. That's 3 points of damage to the Invasive Gene Stealer. And now it's going to have the opportunity to attack, so let's see it, guy. Let's see you go out in a blaze of attempted glory. We see the Invasive Gene Stealers take a swing for 2. Not quite enough to kill the Anxious Infantry platoon. And now let's see Travis seal the deal. It's going to be up to him to use that Anxious Infantry platoon to win him the game. And there we go. We see it exhaust. The Invasive Gene Stealers are outright destroyed. And of course, that is going to be the game. That's going to be Travis with 3 green strongpoint icons. So congratulations to the powerhouse Astra Militarum Warlord, Broderick Worr. And thank you so much. GG, well played to Guy for putting up an amazing fight and just participating in this spectacular game. So congratulations to Travis. Thank you to both of our players for allowing me the opportunity to record this incredible match. And of course, thank you so much for watching this video. So I'll just thank our players once again and end this content here by saying, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. Or if you are already subscribed, you're always encouraged to share this content, as the more likes, the more views, the more shares these videos receive, the more potential new players might stumble upon my channel, be exposed to Conquest, try out the game, like what they experience, join our community, and of course, all together we keep sending the message to Fantasy Flight Games to continue to support and to develop for this fantastic product. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I'd encourage you to do so through Twitter or on Facebook, and if you ever feel so inclined to help support the Hive Tyrant, I'd be absolutely honored were you to donate a couple dollars to my Patreon on a strictly monthly basis. So I'll just end things by saying thank you once again for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.